Welcome, interdimensional beings of light. This is fantastic. We're in a 24 paradigm shift lines of 3 lines of 4 reflex over screen adaptation of the surface. The process our communications how to use ourself in setting. There's an internal force to an external force in one cycle, which all communicates in system all through set positions. Now, to understand that, it's a conversion of set locations. This is where it comes into levels how you brought these things in through attraction already. Understanding your internal self is understanding the external of your system. Internal, external, internal, a force recognition of internal setting, but all communicates in setting to your inner core, to your outer core, to your inner center. Inner core to your outer core, to your inner center. Now we have to understand how to modify that in lines of communication setting. Now, in that track location, that's where humanity's interactions right now in line position 24,000 lines of grounds. With a team, they're in lines of communication system and travels into 144 dimensional beings of light, but their intel is now E. E equals lines high center of variance interdimensional beings of light. They are internal location in high core centers to all position location and setting through eternity. Eternity is based on living, existing all at once. Okay, the process of communication setting puts all lines of modification lines of grounds. So you're going to see more general and frequency lines of grounds into all levels of computer interface. That puts all lines of interline, interlink, interline core centers and box frames in the communication system. So when you get activated, you know exactly what's going on with your attractions and system. This owns all signals, modification of ground lines of calculations, green lines, adaptations, outlines of confusion system. Process line, directed signals, ground lines of surface, and track communication, high position location travel. All right, so it's going to get more complicated with general now because you're reaching higher frequency lines of grounds. Communicate to high line settings, processing, communicates high lines of measure. Scales communication system, overrides sequence, overrides of charged centers, box frame, set course centers inside position. That's where everybody's now in set position, inside their setting. 24 channels into 144 channels of frequency, inside setting. They're all in there now. Now you send the point lines, attractions, and 4 point lines, communication lines, and configuration, setting, pixelation, grounds. Setting process and communication lines of 3 tractions and settings. Process lines of 3. Setting core lines of 1, straight lines of anomaly, 3 lines of 4. Process lines of 1 in position of 2, in position of 3, in position of 4. Split lines of anomaly, 1, 2 over attractions. Set position lines of high position over lines of 4. Set position lines of 3. That's 7 lines of signals and travel communications. All right, so directing lines. Now we have stand the position of inversion. This is the position lines of track location with 3 line cycles of outversion. Directing lines of signals, ground lines of service. Pixelation graph in a 40 line, 45 line screen adaptation system. Pixelation graphs and communicates inside the TV receptor setting. Process communication lines of grounds, overline sequence, cross-line signals, and graph communications inside tractions. So that's where everybody is right now in set position. All right, so we've got 24 ground lines. So the 24 ground is inside. Okay, inside tractions. 2 panels in position of 1 ground line south. Line consists of 1 line northeast, line set position location measure, and scales communication setting, NEWS. Current events and line rotation cycles, direct lines of data files, process lines of signals, and process communications. Process and calculation setting, outline signals, 3 lines of tractions, high centers, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, and data files on 3 track locations. Directing signals on I lines, high rotation surface, and track locations in the opposite direct signals and travel. Okay, so we have a structural line division, wall sequence line. So the actual building itself, okay, is all levels of its galactic energy core, which is a high position of its galactic hub that puts everything in track locations to all setting. Okay, processing that is your Merkaba and track location system. 2 angle point lines of graph and line position location of 3 lines of measure puts 5 lines of signals into all core set correlation system and travel that puts everything location setting to configuration system through your light metaphors that line signals that travels in track correlation system and 3 lines and 4 lines of measure. The scales communication system puts lines of high position location setting. Setting lines of travel, 7-digit numbers into 3 lines of area code. Directing lines of height, position lines of 10 equals lines of setting, process lines of 2, sets lines of 12 line calculation screen adaptations into 24,000 line, signature patterns into position location of grounds, sets communication system, all through structure, all through design. Okay, setting sequence, setting travels, endpoint communication setting to travel. Your Merkaba, your tesseract, and your tetrahedron set position. Okay, skyline grids, sky cross, location of crop circles, directing signals, lines of 4 tractions, and 5 lines of measure. Okay, starts calculation, screen lines adaptation. All right, bring it back home in sequence, back panel, back in operation setting. Okay, so everybody is now in the empire. Everybody's home. All right, home is basically where you basically put your set position location of just coming to existing all at once in track location lines, same level, okay, and set position 24,000 grounds, different frequency, high set location DNA tractions. Set lines to division location networks, core lines into the waking line screen adaptation, high center lines, internal lines force, and location external. Directing lines at ground lines of calculated setting, high positions program. Directing core line settings, set lines of box frames, and a TV frame, 3 lines of core centers, lines of travel. Set core lines of 1 in position of 2 over 3 and 4 set track locations. Directing lines, everything is inside tractions. Now you have to understand how to use that in set position. Okay, travel lines, direct signals. Now you got a ground lines of surface, docking 1, docking 2, launching 3, launching 4 through hangar. Okay, process line indicates system. Electrical line grids, set position location of travel. Right, set core lines high center, 3 lines of flux. Sending core track location, 1 line provision, outline sequence. Set position location, outline sequence of grounds, and outline location. Set your modems, your satellites, and your towers of communication. Directing signal lines of grounds, triangulation flux, triangulation grounds, triangulation and panels, triangulation overline sequence lines of communication. Direct lines, process lines indicating system, all through tractions in your Stargate and communication. Oh, there's your Stargate. Okay, so you got 24 grounds, that's overline sequence. And position lines of track location lines into high set correlation setting, 1/3 line grounds, 1/2 in position locations, 1/4 in track location setting, 1/6, 1/2 lines and half pipe, 7/8 in line grounds, and 9 lines of center in track correlations high position locations, sending core centers into 1,044 line position of mine receptor and traction. Directing lines of sync opens all signals and ground lines of surface. Processing communication system all through travel. Direct lines and modification high core centers in your compass and track location. Towers of communication. All right, so we got a line signal location cross lines. We have center core system and 4 lines of panels, 3 track locations, 2 lines of signals, and process communication lines of center. Sets communication high position location setting into pi and 2 line signals and track locations. Sending line direct signals over cross locations, 1 signal, process lines of upline, process line, and set core centers in its track location of its galactic hub, energy core, and rotation surface and tractions. Directing lines of compound. Now the solar line panels, setting core lines as 48,000 line screens, set lines into solar communication system, 3 lines of core centers, outline and screen lines adaptation, process lines of signals, process lines of tractions, and 3 lines of flux and measure and scale communication. Setting lines of grounds, back in center, back in balance, back in operation, screen line adaptation of force. Process lines of indication system, all line settings. So in that core centers, calculation lines, setting line divid, location setting, change lines of 24 sequence, set position of 48 measure, 40 is now in center, cross line signals, cancel latent positions, 72 tractions, sets lines of 48 line position, outline signal. Process lines, position of 24 line signal. Processing communication lines of 12 line signal, which is the outer course. Okay, sets position 40, 24, and 12. Set position line high center interference over crossing screen adaptation of process lines, track location lines into plasma screens. 3 lines of indication system, all through travel, compass line, position location, 3 lines of measure, scales communication lines of high set core lanes and hydraulics, directing lines of measure and scale and plasma screen adaptation of force. Processing communication system, high lines of travels. So net lines of the flux between 3 lines of signals, outline cross location inside position lines of travel. Process lines indicating high position location, high center, high position location of setting. So we take the 1/6, position 1/4, and we take the 1/2 and position 1/3 in travel in communications. Process lines of indication high position location, high centers. 9 lines of sequence, cross line calculation setting. Process lines of 7/8 in program correlate setting. Code weaving core track lines, high set line position location lines of 10 times lines of 10 position location of 2 and process communication line high track location system in track correlate setting. Changes communication lines of perimeters, direct lines of 3 lines of flux and 3 track located in high position location measure. Crop circle set position. Oh yeah, there's a crop circle. All right, so your central system is out of 24,000 lines. It's in a 40,000 line frame. Direct lines of flux, 8 lines of center, and 4 track location system. Process lines indicate lines flux over screen and over cross location of the grounds at set position its operation. Directing lines of signals, ground lines of service, processing communication lines of ground, communication lines of flux over screen. Directing ground lines, high center interference, back at home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation, high position location travel. Boom. That's my equation. Setting course lines. Now, the metric meter core lines is a code configuration setting to your light and your dark codes. Read lines is calculation, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Processing communication system all through crop circles. Directing lines of code being. Set position of transformation system all through all levels. Code being like course centers, lines of 3 lines of flux of 4 communication setting, inner lines of course centers, interlinking line communication, high position location travels into your computer interface. Now, the interface inner lines of lock location setting to streaming. I need the team to get it in line screen adaptation hardware and software and create their own websites and algorithms through their encryptions and set track location setting all through operation. All right. Okay, line course centers. We have a core line system into a flux, screen lines adaptations into its flywheel, and center communication lines of travel. Directing lines of grounds, set position of one center, process line, high set core lines, high travels, your teleportation lines of tele-waving, telecommunication, telegraphing, inline rotation circuit, and travel. Set communication high position location of center and track location system all through its setting. Processing communication high line, high center location setting. XT1000 outside signals and 3 lines of tractions, 4 lines of measure. Set position of 6 over tractions, direct signals of grounds. Setting core lines of calculation high position location, line, high tide line, position location travel. 3 lines of signals, 3 lines of travel, 3 lines of 4s, 4 lines of 6, and 8 lines of measure. Scales communication setting and travel communications. Done by equation. Boom. All inside a TV. All inside a TV. Hooah. All right. Okay. It's all inside you. Oh, it's moved by itself. You see it move? You see it move by itself? Oh, what's going on? All right. Set of course centers, back in traction, back in visual location, high side position location calculation. Boom. All right. So the center core, yes, very powerful set track location to its system. Right? All right. And then rotates and it goes around its system, location to its system. All lines, signal lines, interline calculation system of the core. Interface lines, directing signal lines, course centers, line communication lines, center core system, around the clocking system. Center lines into relay programs, directing lines and high course centers, existing all at once, everything happening at once, all travel, endpoint communication system, all through track locations. Ooh-ah, right? Look at that. It was going too fast. I got to do it again so you can see the frequencies. Frequency is not ready for year and signal because the lines at high position location 48,000. It's just a solar graph screen line adaptation setting and set track location system, all through set positional operation set lines. Configuration face recognition setting time. Configuration of face recognition settings of time. Okay? Ooh-ah. Boom. Travels lines, all in sequence, on the panel, existing all at once. All right, setting signals, sets lines of grounds. Now we have to understand the inner core center, the pixelation graphs. Okay, so we've got the I line, let's go core track communication, high position location of core lines. Cataracts and set position lines of travel. 3 indication lines of 4, 3 lines of communication lines of 7. Process lines in the line position location of its oval and track location of its system. Setting lines of cataracts, line position waving line screens, direct long location, high position location or high center location to its flux and travel. Directing signals, ground lines of pi, sets core lines of tractions. Directing lines, course centers, high position location of floaters, lines of 12 measure. 3 lines of sequence into 4 communications override sequence, 4 panels into 3 track locations setting to travel. Directing signal lines of grounds, overline sequence and communication of high center location of travel. Platforms line sequence, high position over line sequence, high position location of travel. Directing lines, ground lines of service, ground lines of set position location of Saturn, and direct signals of modification grounds. Ooh-ah, Saturn. See the walking panel, see the high core centers, light signals, line screens, changing communication high centers of service, processing communication high set travel. Directed signals, modification settings, swinging lines, travel point lines of graph, catalyst, catapult, line position location measure. Energize, point lines of graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 14 track locations. Travel core lines, high setting. Configuration system, all through colossal, all through traction, all through vision locations. All right, there's no light outside. It's all inside your internal line and external lines of force, sets specific locations measure that change communication on high centers, all communications, all at once, all in signal. Seconds, minutes, and pi. Core lines of 3 tractions and 3 lines of grounds as set position lines of surface. Process lines of platforms of 1, 2, and 3 in syntax and mystical cortex and set design. Platforms in communication setting, travels, sets core lines into graph communication X8000 and plateau division. Booyah! Look at that through question. Travel line, directed signals light through travel, point lines of communication setting, internal to external lines, and direct and redirected panels and communication system, all through travel, all through mechanism, all positional force. All right, high core centers, high direct signals, back modification, ground lines, and surface attractions. Set lines, signal locations, high travels, point line communications. Configuration lights. Let's go through light metaphors, lines of pixelation, graph, communication lines, of box frame, in position lines of travel. Okay, so we got a box frame here, pixelation graphs, 45 angle. And we got 1 strip, 2 strip, 3 strip, 4 strip, 5 strip, 6 strip, and 7 setting. See the 7 and set location? All right, so 7 lines anomaly, cross line communication, over lines of sequence. Process line position location that travels in 3 lines of signals in high position. Process communication lines of 3 track locations. Towers of communication lines of 3 centers. 4 communication setting and set position lines of travel. Boom. Structure of the building and set track location of the system, all through measure. Oh yeah. Okay, so we added line screen to an X8000 of 4 platforms and setting lines of travel. Okay, setting signals, ground lines of 1, platforms of 3. Okay, process line indicates over cross locations going through one side, inside, outside line position location, measures and scales over line screen adaptation. Okay, center core system line calculation setting. Travels position over line signal. Process lines of 1 indication set in a platform and track location lines into another building that overlines its signals and ground lines of surface track locations. Tracking calculation lines, ground lines, symbol lines of 1, symbol lines of 2, and travel in position. Process lines of indication system, all through setting. Ground lines of surface and 3 lines of angles. Set core lines, high position location 1, in position 2, and cross lines of 3, and track locations. Setting signals, ground lines of core centers, overline sequence panels, others line sequence, line position location, and confusion. It's confusion, right? But it's the building on all sides. Set communication lines of travel, set core centers, and intercept position. Inner lines, inner direct signals, the ground lines of service. Look at this in travel. Booyah. Inside, there's the train. See? See the shelter? See the ceiling above? See the cross angles? There's the train inside position. All right, so center core line communication high position location of center and position lines of 3 lines, setting lines of 2 and position lines of 1's track location setting. Process indicate high centers, puts all communications in high lines of surface attractions. So we got an A track, set position lines of B track, setting core communication lines of C track, position lines of D factors, setting core lines of question in track location system, triangulation box, set core lines in fusion. Booyah. Travels lines, direct signals, modification grounds all at once. See? It gets more complicated now because you're aligning and signaling your systems and all through travel. But it's amazing how you can see the train inside the shelter, how it's traveling in its own system of its door reckonings of timelines, all at once in sequence, all through 3 buildings and travel communications. See? Open panels, open signal, open modification. From that, into that, and into this. Look at that. On the other side. See the gridding? See the train? It's on the other side now. Went from shelter to the grounds of grids. 4 angles, a clocking system, lines of travel, point lines of graph, communication, high position, communication, measure, scales, communication, lines of triangulation and flux, setting lines of travel, in point line, communications, high centers. Processing communication system, all through travel. Directing lines of modification, ground communication system, lines of travel. All right, so we have panel communication high centers, puts lines of graphs into dimensional door scales, 3 lines of signals, process lines of set position inside track locations, directing lines of 1, directing lines of 2, and directing lines of 3 in track locations. Center lines, quarter lines, high set position of box frames, triangulation frames, pixelation frames, ground communication, high lines of surface attractions. Hooah. See how you create these things, the anomaly, location, holographic structure streams, the direct state locations, the inner line calculation setting. The schematics get more complicated, but more fun in track location in reality in real time, right? From this in settings, process this in locations. Look at that. See, gridding on the grounds and the train in the ceiling. The ceiling's above the train, but the grid is on the grounds. So that sets core center line communication system. You and travel and direct signals on the ground lines of service, where the ceiling is high lines of signals and you are down in the holographic gridding, set track location system. All for 4 lines of measures. Setting communication high centers in direct signals of ground lines of surface. Setting communication here and travel. Okay, setting communication here and travel. Okay, setting communication here and travel. Okay, one side to the other side, and setting communication here and travel, where the train is above the signal and you are on the grounds walking the system as holographic structure design. Hooah! Set track location, high center location, system multi-travel. Back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation setting. Whoa. Okay? I'm just showing you. The more you get in position, the more you stand in 4-line signals that all communicates in setting high travel communications. Or line position location of this. Or line positions of this. Or line positions of this. Same frame, different lines of communication, right? All at once. So, but it's very powerful when you see this in travel. Look at that, look at it traveling. Whoa, all at once, all at once. In lines of course centers, in geometric lines, operation set within the lines of internal and external force in one signal, one position, one panel, one operation screen. All right, sending core lines of travels, but it's very powerful. How you see this in travel, right? And how you see this in travel. Okay, look at that. See? Travel all along communication, all lines, same position. So 4 lines of signals of north, east, west, and south puts lines of current view, directing lines of your CCTV. Now, caption lines into core lines of track centers into complicate the lines of compliance. Setting lines of core centers, line communication, high position with teleportation, screen line location, and volume that vastly accelerates the lines of screen adaptation, lines of Mach that sets communication sitting, high travel, and communication line high position. From this, very powerful. Check out the drawing, the structure of design. From this, look at that. See? And from this, look at that, above and you below on the holographic grid, right? And in position to its setting. And track location to its system and travel. Hoo-ah. So it's amazing how you can bring the train up and how you can bring the ceiling down. And 4 lines of flux and line position location to measure and scale. Travels input lines of graph communication all at once. So the more you guys go inside lines, the introspection becomes the outer spectrum. The outer spectrum becomes the interspection location setting and travel. So what do you think is happening when you guys are in remote or recharge, and when you're napping, or when you're sleeping position? Your phone is doing exactly what it needs to do in configuration of pixelation grounds. It's creating its own anomaly. It's creating its own structure. It's creating its own design, guys. It's an inline calculation of lines of high position location, pixelation, graphing, communication, high position location, modification grounds. It sets all communication system all through travel, all right? That's going to have 4 lines of X lines of ones. Process out, process in, okay? Setting lines of 7 over 1 line signals and 1 ground, okay? 4 lines of tractions, high centers, 45 angles and travel into A line setting. Process lines of evac, process lines of C, process lines of D, and process lines of A travel. Sets communicating high position location to its all level signals location to its bird. There's the bird. All right, process lines of high center interference, process in communication high travels, point lines of high set location to its tail, process in communication to its system, all through track location to its setting. Booyah. So it's very powerful when you get a direct line of link and lines of travel communication to high centers. Process lines that indicates the system, all through ground lines of surface and tractions. Tracking lines, satellites, high core centers, 3 track location, high position, 1 in position of 2, and 3 lines of measure. There's your satellite correlation. So it travels in point communication lines at grounds and set position, location, measure, and scale communications. Okay? Bring it back home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation. Set track location settings of travel. All right. So, but it's very powerful when you understand how to connect to higher lines of force and set position locations to a 48,000 measure. Scales this communication setting into configurations to a 72,000 computer framing. Track to its communication set all lines of travel. Inside, outside, outside, inside. So you see that, and then you also see this on the other side. Then you see this on the grounds, right? You're there, and the actual train is in this center. It's in the skyline. It's above It's above. You've seen it above, right? So when you look up, you see it going across as you're looking down. Looking up and travel. Okay? As you're walking across the holographic grid. All right, so we all have to identify position lines and line and location setting to your current events that puts lines, course, centers of travel that has a direct line link that puts everything location system all through calculations. Setting direct lines of setting, processing, communication system all through travel. Directing lines of modification, high center, location, high positions. All right, so we get a 23 line measure. Setting lines of course, centers, line position of 6 lines of calculations. Setting lines of track centers, and we'll get it in positions. We'll wait till it gets to 50 lines. So we get 25 line clocking equals lines of 50 track communication, high center line position locations. 3 lines of indication 1, centers lines of travel, 3 lines of indication system, all through program. All right, so we have a direct line link, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, and track locations. Directing lines, course centers, 2 lines of tractions, setting lines of 5 lines of measures, scales communication lines of perimeters in 3 lines, setting core lines of 5 track locations, overline sequence, overline panel, 6 lines of measure, scales communication lines of high setting. Process line of indication system, all through your towers of communication system and travel. Your 2 towers. Okay, structure line division. Course centers over cross, setting direct signals to 3 lines of course centers, lines of travel. Setting calculation ground lines, set position of 1 into 2, flux over 3, flux over 5, 6, 8, 12, and 24 lines of measure and travel communications. Structure division, holographic grading. Direct lines of signals, line position location measure, scales communicate high position location exceed 1000 above signal. Setting ground lines, course centers in the tubing and track locations. Downshift lines anomaly into docking setting into processing communication lines of high centers, E factors over 1, directing lines signals, process lines of 4 line signals and travel communications. Your holographic grids. Okay? So 2 towers come in interactions. There's your towers. Right there in signal. Process calculates lines, high center interference, your modem, your Wi-Fi's. Sound barriers go off and travel communication system all through echo lines. Core lines and echo lines and portal communication comes in high signals. Process and communication high center lines of travel and direct signals and modification. Portal communication coming out in signal. So setting track lines and configures the system all through travel. Point lines and calculate setting. X8001. Okay, let's open signals, ground lines of 1. Set position of 2, set position of 3, and set position of 4 in travel. And communication setting inside the portal. Sets core lines of travels, endpoint lines of graph, directing lines of settings, process in-line position of 3 lines of measure, scales communication setting, and all lines of travel, indicate position location, higher lines of dimensional lines and space lines, and position location, inner core and outer core. Set track lines, high direct location of signals. Process lines, look at this in grid locations. Hoo-ah. Okay, always see it in 4 lines of flux. Always see it in the 4 lines of flux, like that. Okay, above the signals in the ceiling lights and travel endpoint communications. Direct lines of panels, process and communication, high lines of travel. It's complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All right, so I'm just getting you guys to understand more lines of position location is spending more time in set position lines of travel has direct line link. Now the interception to the interception has 1 link center. Sets position location of box frame, 1 line link, position of 1 streaming, directing signal location of your CCTV, directing core lines of calculation setting, coordinates lines, communication high interference, telegraphing communication high position of vast, sets travels, and set communication lines of travel. Process lines indicating system to location grid. Directing lines of 4 lines of flux, 3 lines of measure, 3 lines of correlations, and 4 track locations. Setting direct lines. 4 lines of signals, window frames, data formation lines, and gridding. Setting 3 lines of files and track locations. Inside traction. Okay, so we got a high position location measure, scales communication high center line position location to an energetic dome and screen adaptation. Process lines and highways. Direct lines of 1, process line, indicate lines of 3 panels and travel. There's the road. Road and signal line grounds. Setting core lines of track centers and location system all through skyline. So we have grid lines, course centers, X8000s, and grid lines, communication setting, and process calculation. Directing signals, ground lines of service. Now we got a train here going in this direction in the opposite cycle and set the correlation. Setting course centers, lines of travel. Directing lines of modification, high position location, high set position location measure, scales communication, high lines of surface, traction. Setting core lines, track to position location of holographic streams. Directed signal lines of grounds. Center core line communication setting. High lines of travels, point lines of grav. Center core system, high position location of box. Frame communication, high center location of flux. Inline rotation, inside position lines of travel. Okay? Core lines of tractions, outline, over cross locations, inside position lines of travel. Okay? Setting grounds, lines of surface, and track location of a system. Setting ground communication, high lines of surface and track locations. Okay? So it's amazing bringing it back home, back in sequence, back, panel back on operation screen. Ooh-ah. Okay? So you come into your holographic city and you start to understand your reality, so what you want it to look like. But it's a line course centers into reminding you in positions how to come in position of configuration setting the compressors, how to send the flux line in 3 lines of signals, compressors 1, compressors 2, and travel. Flux ground line course centers, line direct signals of 3 lines of signals. Process indicates settings of towers and 3 track locations on one side. Okay, so unison, snowy graph interference in a blank slate. Okay, if your building's blank slate, that's an off-cross location screen line. Pixelation graph has lines with loosing lines, course centers, lacing line communication system. 1 travel point lines, offsetting. That's your floaters off traction. Floater line communication lines of 3 lines of measure, 3 lines of track correlation system. Process lines indicate lines of position lines of 2 over lines in flux over screen in adaptation of force. Echoes lines of screen adaptation of Charlie. Directed signals, ground lines of surface out through windows and frame communication holographic grading. Directed lines of structures, directing line division. Setting core line calculates lines XT1000 above line signal. Process line calculates setting, grading lines of 1, grading lines of 2, set lines of another XT1000 docking, and 3 track location, high position location measure. Scales communication, high position location travel. Set calculates lines, ground lines of 1 over cross lines of 4 track locations. Setting ground lines of setting, process lines that indicate high set position of program correlates and high position location call high set track location lines, position 1 line, position location 3 lines measure. Scales communication, high lines of grids, setting cross line signals, process lines over portals, indirect signals of wormholes and track locations. Ooh-ah. So, the more you get interlined in your system and tractions, then you understand your holographic gridding and track locations. Okay? To know exactly what's going on in your space-time lines of anomaly. And all communication high lines of service. See what you get in position lines of travel? Setting core lines, tracking centers, tracking division location to its system. Oh yeah. Okay, I know it's a lot. But I'm just telling you unison how you got into your lacing lines on a clean slate. So it's exactly line position of triangulation here, and not understanding the shadows of 2 sides. Modification here, the sun, set position here in 3 track location. All right, so you have this in setting, half line angles and travel, okay, in set position. This is the triangulation on the same setting, right? If it's going in the opposite direction, if your sun's here, it's off position, right? So it has to be in the same direct line link of direct and redirect, okay? Because if not, it's just a clean slate with no angles or point lines of light. So you got to make sure the sun's here, and you got to make the sun's here, and the lines of 3 lines of triangulation in high settings, process lines of indication here, process lines of correlation instead of 3 lines of flux. So you got 3 lines of different angles of shade and shadow, different lines of set position, different correlation setting lines of travel. Right, so that's where you get modification lines of your sun in position of your moon and center core system and travel communication. Okay, and that's all through triangulation flux. Now you have to understand light, shade, and shadows. So in that position, let's get into box frame. 2 signals. This is all dark. Lacing lines of confusion setting, right? It's a clean slate, right? So in that core centers, outline signals into the moons of behavior. You got to stay within the frame. In the frame, guys, okay? Don't go out of the frame because it's configuration system, the pattern recognition is offsetting your light metaphors. XT1000 comes in, cleans it up, cleans it up, cleans it up in 3 tractions, and basically puts everything back in set position, okay? So the basic understanding is stay within the box because now you're in temperature readings. Setting core lines of track, communication lines of communication system lines of travel. Direct lines of inner line links and 3 lines of travel to your building. Remember, it's all track locations. Setting lines of high centers, lines of outspace lines of communication lines of your building. Processing communication lines of flux over 3 lines of track locations to your buildings. Okay, ground lines of course centers. We have direct lines of the sun here that gets very confused and not understanding the signature patterns and set position of sonar. Directed signals lines of sun over tracking of its wormhole that sets course centers line communications at a configuration system, all through travel, all through part acceleration system, all through time through travel. Hooah! Travel point lines is high set position location measure, scales communication high, position location of the system disappears by itself because it doesn't understand its modification lines of travel. Right? Goes back in sequence, back in panel, back where it's supposed to be in set position. Done by equation. Bounce core line center is a pixelation lines and the configuration location light patterns. High signals, high core centers lines of travel. It has direct lines of link, process into your streaming, directing signal location system off the lines of box frames, because that's where you guys in your TV frame. Box frame, TV frame, right? Reception setting, core lines of channels, point lines of tracks into 3 dials. Core lines of high centers, 1 setting, process over cross location of 3 lines of measure. Gridding and communication lines of high lines of surface. All right. Process lines indicate lines alpha, delta, and theta communication. All right. Second, high core centers. X2000 comes at center, sees what you're doing. Process lines takes off and track locations and know exactly what you're going through. All right. So in that track lines, in that direct lines, the platforms changes the coloration lines of pathogens. Changes communication high centers and travel communication setting high position. Setting core lines of track centers and open sequence lines of communication. Directing lines, flex lines of screen, position of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and gridding. Setting core lines of travels and direct lines of link and platform communication. Platform lines, core lines of track centers, location setting, high position. Ground lines of settings, process lines that indicate lines of 1, process lines that indicate lines of 3, process lines that indicate lines of 4, and travel communications. Directing lines of link, platforms of communication. Setting core lines, directing lines of link in highways, inventories, lines of track centers, and ground lines of gridding and track locations. Setting lines of signals, bounce communication, high position location of travel. Signify, center lines of 1 in position of 3 over 4, another highway in lines of gridding and track location of its system. Ground lines of surface, over lines, signals, and ground lines at position location of towers of communication. Okay? 4 lines of angles and set position location measure that scales of communication high setting. Okay? All through Asgard and track location. There's Asgard. Boom. All right. Now, what we have to start identifying, I know it's a lot, right? To take in, especially when you're trying to understand all laws of communication lines and gridding. You know, grid correlation system and track locations. Look at that. It's amazing when you come into real reality lines. Real-time measure, real-time scale. But the most powerful thing is to recognize this in all formation lines and grounds and 4-line signals. This way, set position locations. In this way, and travel, different lines. Same frame, just different angles and travels and communications. All right? It's amazing when you start to modify your system. All through track locations. Okay, so once you send 4 lines of measure, that changes automatically the lines of course center location to interception locations, your Wi-Fi's. Wi-Fi indicate lines of 2 towers, setting lines of signals of 3 lines of measure. Scale the lines of box frame, triangulation frame, offline communication lines, a high position location of its frame lines into flux over screen. Okay, look at that in track locations. Directing lines and signals and ground lines of surface. Setting core lines of channels, offline signal location, of course. Sets communication lines of here, sets communication lines of here, sets communication lines of here, and set position of 1 center operation system to your satellite. Directing lines of ground, setting core lines of channels, operation server location setting and configuration system all through tone. Directing core lines of settings into your central system. Setting lines of ground lines of surface and track locations. Setting signals, ground lines of 1, ground lines of 2, ground lines of 3, process lines, high center location of travel. Oh yeah, satellite position. Ground lines, of course, centers. Bring in Pluto. Pluto comes in line track locations. Set in 3 lines of signals, ground lines of surface, and track location. Okay? Bring it back home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation. So we all have to understand how to go from the 0 grounds and configurations of face direction and time sequence, put pixelation grounds. So they have a box line frame. Okay, and you got position lines of pixels. Pixels here, pixels here. Now it's in your TV, and it's a line signal, in like this locations, right? This is the box frame of your TV. Okay? Now, you have to understand the box lines at 4-point settings. This graph gives communication to its hanger. So this is where captain comes in, position of echo, and traffic lines of inventory system to its high set location to its system, all through its connection setting. Okay, it's taxi runways. Flux over 3, flux over 4, okay, is track locations. Directing modification ground lines, 4 lines of signals, process lines of 4 lines of measure. Scales communication high centers, lines of travel, and direct signals at TV ops and set correlation lines of grounds. Setting communication high center locations, outline signals in 4 lines of communication setting, waving screen lines into its echo chambers and screen adaptation. Process lines of window frames over cross location system, window frames in line centers in interception location setting the lines of travel. Direct lines of door screens in position location open window and set position. Travel point lines graph communication line high signals. Okay, so we got platforms here. There's the highways. There's the taxi runway. Okay, center core lines of travels, point lines of graphs. Center core lines of high core lines hangers. Set platforms and 3 lines of signals and travel communications. Direct lines of grounds, hangers 1, hanger 2. Process lines indicate system all through travel. Setting core lines of channels in operation sequence lines of panel and track locations. Dimensional door, signify high core centers, in core centers, line communication setting, and lines of travel. Directing in lines, high core lines, a high position location, high delta line communication lines of travel. Interline rotations, interline direct signals, dimensional door lines, a skyline grids lines of travel. Direct lines modification, high set position location measure. Okay, center line op, you're in the center operation, directing signals, traveling in position 3 platforms and track location of system, all through communications. Ooh-ah. Center core lines, up line, swing line, ground lines of surface interactions, all through dimensional door. Signify, center core system lines of travel, point lines of graphs, 3 core lines, high direct signals of 3 lines of flux, 3 core centers lines of travel, in the indication system, all through colossal direct signals of ground lines of surface interaction. Sets position location operation high setting. Center lines of center line, core lines of travel and communication. And 45 communication lines of center of travel. Okay. Signify, high ground lines of surface and track communications. All done through equation. All right, your center off position your X3000s above signal, rotation to the system. Setting core lines of tractions, 3 lines of measure, 4 lines of signals, 4 lines of settings, process and communication lines of 4 communications. Inside track locations, inside the hangars and track locations. All right, so we got ground lines, cross lines of 1 center, process lines into position of 4 panels, and direct signals of ground lines of surface in that communication system all through travel. Directing line signals, cross lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 lines 6, 8 lines of 12, and position of process communication, cross line angles, and track locations. Look at that through equation. Booyah. Sets lines of travel all at once, all in sequence, all in panels, all in pixelation, all hologram. Center communication 1, center communication lines of 4, center communication lines of 3, center communication lines of 2, all through traction. Set core lines, high position location of recourse and setting. Ceiling, now you're above the ceiling. The center core system has now changed the measure scale. All right, so we have ground lines of settings, process lines that indicate the system. We come into bold screens. Bold screen of its dimensional door and set position. Cross lines of angles into 4 lines, split lines of anomaly. Setting core lines of channels of 3 lines of flux and ground lines of surface. Setting indications of 1, 2, and 3 panels of communication. Directing ground lines into 1, 2, 3 lines that set correlation lines of travel. Setting core centers and track location system. Ooh-ah. Done by equation. Okay? All through travel, all through track locations. All right, and a 45 communication setting to travel. This way, this way, this way, and this way. All right, but it's amazing when you're actually bringing it in travel and communication system. It shows everything inside track locations. Look at that, boom. Look at powerful that is. So the realism and everything in reality changes lines into the interception to the excursion. Now the excursion, this location escalates. This activates the system lines of travel, setting lines of 4 lines of track centers in position location of grounds, 2 panels, and ceiling of operation of center communication. Very powerful stuff. Look, inside, guys. Inside. Isn't that amazing? When you start understanding through traction. All right. Now we got to communicate lines of ground. So we set position location as measured. Scales as communication lines of surface. Now we go through the pixelation ground lines of setting. Okay, that puts all communication setting or clocking systems of 1, clocking systems of 2, clocking system of center, clocking system outlines the screen. 3 lines of measure, scales position of flux over through communication inside tractions. Indicate high centers, line communication your satellites and communication. There's your satellite. Signify high course centers of center communication, high center line position location measured, and scales communication lines of towers, direct lines of pyramid and track location system, alter portals and stargates, realign course centers in position location to a system and track location. Directing lines of grounds, set course centers, lines of travel communications. All right, indicates lines of flux over 1, influx over 2, sonar lines and echo chambers and foxtrot. Directing signals, ground lines of setting, process lines of 1 indications over line, X line platform to 3 travels, pi generation lines of position location to its compass, sonar, echo, and screen adaptation. Process indicates system and ground lines of surface and track locations. Okay. Monitoring lines, core lines of travels, back and center, back in operation. Travels the lines, high signals all at once is signal. All together in real-time measure, real scale, everything's happening all at once. So understand your TV relays sets lines, communication lines of interset location of intercourse. The course lines and calculates and setting lines of travel. Now the interline course centers puts everything in track location in your system. So inner lines of calculation, setting and screening, adaptations of 1, process lines of 2, and process lines of 3 in traction. Okay, see the gridding? Cross lines of windows. It's set position of 3 lines of measure. Change communication high centers of grounds of surface and track locations. Look at this in setting. Your pyramid inside. So it's amazing how you change lines of time sequence, changes panels, inline rotation surface and grounds. So that's communication high centers, platforms in position location to a system all through traction. Open sequence, open panel, signal lines, high center lines of travels, and make location inside course. In track location. Remember, you got to get in lines of communication. Start to see the directions of time and centers. Boxing frame correlations in set position. In set position of its dimensional door set core line. Inside the door. In track locations. Inside the door through track locations. See? All through light. Glowing through mechanism time sequence, isn't it? Setting core lines of travels and direct signals of modification grounds. All through light, all through tractions. Okay? See? See that indication here? See that indication here. White platform, blank slate. Blank slate, white platform. Dark over light, light over dark. In set position of symbolism, 1 track centers. Processing communication setting high position, inner lines, and rotation outline correlation. Inside tractions. All right, so everybody's at location setting as it travels, has direct lines, high position location it's measured. That basically scales everything in lines of interception location to its cycle. Setting lines at calculation setting puts all communication lines at grounds at set position. All through tractions. Okay, so are we at 48? Yes, we are. Coming into 49. Not a coincidence. Setting sequence lines of panel has a box frame and a triangulation surface. Through triangulation outlines a high correlation setting to travel. Sets calculation screen, adaptation 1 surface, 1 tractions, cross line signals, 4 signals, and line position location with setting. Very complicated stuff, but then you can actually see it inside track location. Very complicated. And then you put the towers. Look, this is the towers. It's really interesting stuff when you really start to measure in all track locations. Look at that. Booyah. See? It's all geometric. It's all travel. All in one signal. All in line position location to a system. All right, then we got the roads. Setting lines of grounds, a gridding line communication, holographic gridding communicates to its setting all through travel. Whoa, it's getting real, isn't it? Woo-wee! right? And then we cross line. Here's the angles of the car. Car's coming in. Here's the car coming in. Okay, here the car goes. So I'm showing you exactly what you can do from intercepting locations, setting interception locations to all levels, outline signals into the inner core and track locations. Hoo-ah. Booyah! Does that mind blow your system? Okay? Now, recourse lines, hydraulic signals, and ground. So check this out. Wall sequence lines of panel. Look at this, all through box frame. Look at this interactions. All different angles. Woo! Look at this. This is wild. Whoa! All right. So it's amazing what you see inside of everything. And then we have a line signal communicating with the other all at once. All right, they're all communicating through electrical lines of poles. Pole lines of signals, all at once, real lines, core centers, inline position, energy lines of force line communications. Directing lines of signals, ground lines of service. Which means it changes the metric meters of scales of 3 communication system all through travel of its car. Hoo-ah! Powerful, isn't it? Now you understand how it's so important to see yourself inside of everything. The L core lines of the inner center location of its system, all through travel, all through a box frame, all through a triangulation system locations. See the story frame, right? So that's all it is in travel. And that position location setting. And let's add equation center. Let's add position location to its post. Here's a post. There's a post, right? Now, somebody is standing there at the post, right? And here's a box frame inside waiting to go, being picked up to go on the bus. Booyah! Hoo-ah! Now you're just adding lines of signals now. Let's just add the panels, different poles, traveling in its rotation in the same directions, same level, different frequencies and travel. Look at that. Whoa! See how it comes to life? In all formations, of all grounds, in all powers of its atmosphere, of its design. Inside of everything. It doesn't get any more real than that. Okay? And then you can color it in. Let's color it in. Okay, color in the positions of all those pixelation grounds. Setting lines of track centers, we just color it in position. You see the track locations. And color it in now. 3 lines of panels, pixelates and graphs. Intercept, correlates, and height set position, intercept position. 3 signals, 2 centers into 1 surface. Booyah! Okay? Let's color it the cars. Let's get position of blue. Now, one color is all color, but this is one teleportation unit. Remember, everything is existing all at once, but this is one car. This is another car. We're going to try locations. Let's get in position locations and settings. Process communication system all through travel. Let's get in line communication lines of purple. So this is a purple car. And setting lines of travel. Okay, so now we got an indication line high position of traffic now. Direct lines of link. Direct lines of panel, direct lines of core centers of traffic inventory. This is a flow line core centers into force rates and time sequence. Puts all track location lines of your TV receptor line, screen adaptation and setting that process communication setting of a jam. Okay? All right, so setting core centers, line direct signals, ground lines of service, set position location of system. Let's add some mountains in the back line core centers. Now this is inside line position. Okay, there's the mountain and tractions. See the mountain? Is it down there? All right, so I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how this all works inside of everything traction. It's much easier how to identify these things, right? And then when you bring it in structured design, it looks like this in 4 different angles in travel. 4 different angles in travel. Look at this, above the ceiling. All right, let's go through a triangulation flux and communication lines of ground, core, centers. Perspective is the way to go to understand the inner line, setting, location of your system. Let's go through box frame again. Okay, but we're going to go on this way, and we're going to go inside position lines of setting. Okay, process lines that indicate cross line and line rotation, surface and traction. All right, so we got two grids, same lines of travel, location grid, line setting. Okay, then you see a mechanism lines of a train coming in signal out through system, all through travel. Okay, so you can see it coming out, right? So setting position locations to bring it in realism is change the core lines of tractions of its computer operations screen. Direct lines of grounds, but you can't do it on a 45 angle. So what you got to do is just set position location of center, bringing it position location to its system. Right, so you can actually see it coming in. Setting there's a flux, and then the more it gets bigger, then you get into the panels of operation. All right, and then you go in this position location to its system, all through travel. That's an outlines of space. Right? This is an inner lines of space. Okay, flux over screen, flux over track location of U and center operation. Okay, setting course centers, 3 tractions, 3 division locations setting, inline rotation surface and track locations. Travel point lines of graph, communication high setting. All right, change course lines of change direct signals of ground lines of surface. Okay. Signify, 3 lines of grounds, 3 lines of channels, 3 operations, surface, and traction. Signify XT1000 over here, XT1000 here, and travel. Remember, everything I put in the XT is out of the frame. Okay, it doesn't go in the inner frame until you understand more levels of U, inner core to the outer core, in position inner center. So you go to 3 track platforms, inside position to its XT1000 and travel. Okay, directing lines of grounds, set course centers, lines of communication, setting lines of travel. Now it gets really interesting when you understand the flux of communication, setting lines of travel. Okay, so we got a solar panel, black hole, setting sequence lines, open sequence lines of panel, and 2 track locations. Signify, ground lines of 1, grounds out cross location of 3 lines of measure that scales its communication setting into its webbing and track location. Okay. Direct lines of panels, open sequence, open panel. Complicated stuff, but you have to understand how to modify and travel communications. Okay? All right, so we go through webbing 1, webbing 2, webbing 3. Cross line settings, ground lines of 1, 2, and 3, lines of flux, and 4 lines of signals and travel. Grid lines, core lines of track centers, indirect signals at opposite set location. Travel position and point lines of graph. Bring home the center, bring operation signals, and back in traction. Booyah. So it's just a story you're telling. And the more you understand that from the inner core, it's much easier to understand your set position location to its outer core. But look at that, guys. Look, inside its traffic of its inventory. It's hologram. Okay? Which is the inversion. Okay? This is you. Looking at everything from inside. That's you looking from everything from inside you. Inside your box frame, your TV receptor. Okay? Complicated, isn't it? Woo! All right. Now we'll do one more frame in line position because I know you guys are like, whoa, this is crazy stuff. Yes, it is, isn't it? Let's get in line position of 2 triangulations. And setting lines of set position over sequence lines of panel. Process lines of 1 triangulation, process lines of 4 triangulation setting. Okay? Process lines of indication overline cross location system and setting. Okay, center core system, 1 travel, direct lines of 4 lines of flux. Setting core lines of high position locations, lines of 4 lines of flux. Setting travel endpoint lines to get 3 lines of communication lines of flux. Setting core lines of communicates inside track location system all through setting. Okay, so the more you get into triangulations, the more you go inside the building. The more you go inside the building, you will actually see inside. You just put in a triangulation system and pixelation graphs. The center core system puts everything in travel, endpoint lines communicates inside the building. This is the structure design line core centers lines of travel. Inside. And then you get a modification system, ground lines of setting. There's a person here on the 2nd floor. There's a person here on the 4th floor. And there's a person here on the 7th floor and a person here in the center communications of a setting. Inside correlation. Inside. All right, so we got a structure panel here. And we get a structure panel here. And we got another sector, vector, and quad, and 3 triangulation angles and setting. But if you look at this, you can see the structure of the building in track locations inside the building. Okay, where all the people are. All right, so ground lines, course centers, lines of position of 3 centers in position, location, with system, all through travel. Oh yeah. Okay, recourse centers, retravels, point lines of graph, change the configured system, lines of time. Change the building and track location and setting. The process is communication system, all through travel, and mechanism lines of force and travel communications. Inside setting, right? Inside, outside, outside, in. 3 angles, 3-point communication system, all through settings, process lines of indication system and travel. Whoa. Okay, looking inside, guys. That's what you guys have to understand, how to use an inner core line, calculate the setting of pixelated graphs, 1/3 lines of grounds, or set track to its communications high setting. Set lines of X T1000 outside your frame. This is you inside your box frame. Okay, so you're doing everything from inside now. X T1000's outside. They're never inside, but they do come inside your building. Okay, but they always go back out. They don't live inside you. They live outside you, inside you. Okay, very powerful stuff, interactions. Setting ground lines, course centers, lines of travel, indirect signals, and modification grounds. Look at the windows and travel, all right? Add windows frames, point lines of graph, in center communication. Now I'm changing the structure of its design. See? See the door? There's a door inside now. All right, set line, position, location, another door. Signal lines, communication, height, position, let's put the handles, and center communications. Center track communications. Ooh-ah, now we're working inside track locations at higher lines of frequencies. Setting core lines of track centers, height, direct signals, and panels. Position location, calculation, height, side, location, one dimensional door, position on screens. Whoa, it's getting complicated. Door there, door opening. Over there and set position, another room. All right, so we set position lines of travel. We change track center line, position location measure, scales, communication lines, where the people are going to be now in set position, existing all at once. Provisionalize the cycles, travel point lines of graph, and communication setting and travel. Booyah. Inside, which is thermal, which is X-ray. Okay? And then you see the structure of the building at different levels and sequencing. Whoa, it's getting interesting, isn't it? More division, higher frequency, more structure, more design. So the more you get holographic, the more you get pixelated. The more you get pixelated, the more you get grounds. And it's that position of 24,000 lines, 40,000 lines of measure, scales communication lines of solar generation lights, set position of 72,000 computer frames, indirect communication lines into your 144 crystal grid, inside position of everything attractions. Inside the building. So that's what the teams come in and track communications. Look at this and flux lines. Traffic communication lines are point lines of graphs. Inside, but at a different angle. All right, so you set position location here. And track locations. Something's coming in, right? Are you identifying that? If not, it goes inside your building. And it restructures its design because you got personal, you got emotional. Now, the inside box is now changed all through the intelligence that you brought in. Uh-oh! Set position here and compound screen adaptation lines of surface interaction. It's restructuring, it's building how it wants to be through its intelligence information of its grounds and track locations. Okay, so you're changing the structure just by bringing the intelligence in, and you were not in position with being conscious awareness of what you brought in your TV frame. Now it's created its own modulation system, all through pixelation grounds of communication. Booyah! You didn't create that. You created this. So it's changing your structure of design of the building that you have no more control of because you put yourself in motion. Different building, different setting, different design. Very powerful set track locations, high position locations, calculations. Hooah! Set lines of 4, set lines of sequence, set lines of panel. Inside the pyramid. See, look at that. Where's the X8000? See that? All through laser, all through traction, all through thermal, all through radiation. All through pixels. Look how powerful it is. Travel line, position, point, lines of graph. This is what happens when you get personal, line, position, emotional lines of traction. Changes light metaphors, location, setting, position, physical links, and correlation, setting, travel. All right, set track lines. Now you have no more control of what you're doing with your intelligence. The intelligence that you brought in is creating its own divergence and alignments and set position to its all levels into its track location inside your building. Your building is no longer a building. Intelligence is taken over. The intelligence has taken over your building because you got emotional. Booyah! Look how powerful it is. I don't think it gets any more powerful than that. Look at this in setting. Booyah. Bringing in track location lines of height set inside track locations. Whoa! Okay? Different angles, different point lines of graph. But you are no longer in control because you got emotional. You changed everything in your T reception of seconds, minutes, and hours because you didn't understand what you were bringing in division. Okay, guys? Very powerful stuff. Back in home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation. Whoa. See how complicated it gets inside your system? So, no more outline, it's inline position. So your structure line, division location, your inner core, your outer core line, your inner shell starts to set structures of communication lines of high settings. Very powerful sequence. So in that lines, identified everything in track correlation system all through travel. Okay? All through travel. Look how powerful it is. Look how powerful it is. You see this? Now, in set position, in all track location, it's on the ceiling. It's in direct signals, in ground lines of surface, setting line communications, high lines of travels. In the air of communication. Here, and you're here on the grounds of the holographic gridding, walking in set position. You see the structure line division now? How powerful it gets when you get in position location of balance. I'm just showing you what happens when you change your patterns of behavior. It takes over your building. It takes over your structure. It takes over your design. It takes over your schematics. It changes over your printer and set track location to its system all through calculations. So don't get emotional. See you in 5.